Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We've all done it. Embarrassingly sent a text message to the wrong person. Unfortunately for the leader of Surrey County Council, texts apparently sent by him ended up being aired at Prime Minister's questions. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn ambushed the PM with leaked messages he claimed showed the government did a sweetheart deal with the council to avoid a politically damaging hike in council tax. Our health and social care correspondent Victoria MacDonald has this report.
Tory-run Surrey Council's plans to hold a referendum to raise council taxes by 15% took many by surprise. But there was another surprise today, this time for the Prime Minister, as Jeremy Corbyn revealed a series of text messages.
I've been leaked copies of texts sent by the Tory leader David Hodge, intended for somebody called Nick, who works for ministers in the Department of Communities and Local Government. And these texts read, "I'm advised that DCLG officials have been working on a solution and you will be contacting me to agree a memorandum of understanding."
The response from Nick, and it's not clear who Nick is, shows that he did not know what Mr Hodge was talking about. So the council leader sent another text with more details, including the line, "The numbers you indicated are the numbers that I understand are acceptable for me to accept and call off the R, in other words, the referendum." Channel 4 News also understands that the Nick who actually received the texts was Nick Forbes, the leader of Newcastle City Council and a member of the Local Government Association, and that he may not have been warned that Mr Corbyn was about to release the texts. In the Commons, the Labour leader accused the government of a sweetheart deal with the council to avoid what would have been an embarrassing move.
All councils have the opportunity to raise the 3% precept, to put that funding into the provision of social care.
And despite another 5 attempts, Mrs May did not admit to a deal or no deal.
What that memorandum of understanding is, well, nobody seems to be able to explain it. But what we do know is that councillors turned up here yesterday expecting to be discussing a referendum to raise council tax by 15%. Instead, a revised agenda suggested 4.99%, which meant that they wouldn't have to call that referendum.
The Lib Dem council leader here said the meeting yesterday was chaotic.
We had 3 adjournments. The budget meeting was delayed to the afternoon, and then we were presented with a 5% increase in council tax.
Was it explained to you at any point during that meeting yesterday how the council could go from needing 15% to needing only 4.99%?
Well, the leader of the council said that he was taking a risk that a solution could be found, but we were given no detail about how that would be achieved or whether some arrangement had been made with the government.
And this was yesterday's meeting where Mr Hodge suddenly announced the changed budget. Today he wasn't in his office. He was variously described as being in Belfast, Wales and at a Rotary event. Surrey is awash with Conservative MPs, including Jeremy Hunt, the Health Secretary, and Philip Hammond, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And it cannot have been comfortable for them when the council first announced its plans. Today, a statement from Mr Hodge said there had been no deal, but 62 Labour councils tonight have written to Mrs May to seek assurance that they get the same as Surrey.
Well, it's not just those texts that have been debated at Westminster. In the last hour, MPs have begun voting on a series of amendments to the Brexit bill that gives the Prime Minister the authority to take the UK out of the European Union, or start the process at least. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is outside the Commons chamber now. Gary.
Well, the moment of maximum danger, really, for the government under this bill came yesterday with that vote on the amendment over whether there should be a meaningful vote further down the passage of negotiations, which would allow MPs potentially to throw the negotiation back in new order in a completely different shape back into Brussels. That didn't happen. It fell. The government had a majority of 39. The majorities on these amendments tonight are comfortably above that, and that means that the government is getting almost certainly what it wanted, in the jargon, a clean bill going through to the House of Lords, one that is unamended, and that is supposed to mean that the Lords don't feel they have the licence, don't actually have the nerve to amend it too heavily. Well, we'll see how that ends up. Another little crisis happening, mini one really, but nonetheless eye-catching on the Labour benches, because there could be up to 4 resignations by the end of tonight from Labour's front bench, from people who don't want to vote for the whole bill unamended. A little bit of destabilisation, you could argue, just when Labour probably doesn't need it. Here's how the day went here.
Theresa May didn't want this bill, thought it could only bring trouble. In the end, the difficulties of getting a House of Commons made up of 75% pro-Remain MPs were overcome. Theresa May insisted the concession, which cut down a Tory rebellion last night, meant MPs would get a vote at the end of the negotiations.
We will bring forward a motion. That motion will be on the final agreement. It will be for approval by both Houses of Parliament. It will be before the final agreement is concluded.
Antoinette Sandbach was one of 7 Tory MPs who rebelled last night because that was not enough.
I think we should have an opportunity to vote deal or no deal. And I think if there's no deal, we need to scrutinise that. We need to go through it. We need to know what the plan is.
And potentially push the Prime Minister back into the negotiating room with a different brief.
Well, we simply don't know.
But that could be a possibility, that you want reserved for Parliament.
Yes, I don't think it undermines her position at all.
Amendments debated today never had enough cross-party support to threaten defeat. The SNP said a new opinion poll suggested a different threat to the government.
The barracking of honourable members opposite and the preventing of SNP MPs from speaking in this House plays right into our hands and results in headlines for this: support for independent surgery.
On the Tory benches, signs that a small rebellion does not mean divisions are forgotten.
The whole tone of the debate, obviously, since the referendum has been so awful and unpleasant, and the forgetting that 48% of the country voted to stay in the European Union, and the inability to build a consensus about the way forward.
I would ask him whether he was concerned, when we appear to be going to stay in the EU, about the terms of TTIP and what that would have done to British farmers. Was he concerned about that, or is he only concerned when it sort of feeds his remaining Remain tendencies?
Up to 4 Labour frontbenchers may defy the 3-line whip in the last vote of the night on the whole unamended bill, including Clive Lewis, touted by some as Jeremy Corbyn's possible successor.
I've got to make a decision on how I vote, haven't I? So, how long have you been there for? It's so cold. Sorry.
Can you give us an indication?
You're not, if I start running, you're not going to run after me.
We're not going to run. I don't think we've got it in us. Can you tell us which way you expect to vote today?
No, I don't know. I'm going to make my mind up, and a lot on my plate.
Morning, sir. Jeremy Corbyn less relaxed about cameras at his front gate.
How nice of you to come here this morning.
Today, Jeremy Corbyn's team denied claims he was preparing to quit as Labour leader, and had even told aides a date for his departure.
Joining us now, Heidi Allen for the Conservatives and Angela Rayner, Labour's Shadow Education Secretary. Angela Rayner, let's just start with you, because, I mean, this was the whole business of Brexit was something which Tory leaders never wanted. No, neither Mr Cameron nor Mrs May. And yet the party that's fallen to pieces is not the Tory party, but your party. 4 more resignations from the front bench tonight, probably.
Well, I've not seen any resignations from our front bench, and we've been absolutely clear right from the start of this process. Our leadership has quite clearly been that we respect the votes. We had a referendum, it divided the country, that's quite clear. However, it was also clear that the referendum result was that we will be leaving the EU, so therefore the vote tonight is about making sure we do the will of the people and we enact that process. Yes, we are still grieving about that. Many people are up and down the country, but we've got to be clear that when we voted for a referendum, we have to be bound by that result, unfortunately. So that means now we have to get on with that business and get on to saying, well, what does Brexit mean and what will the negotiations look like?
The extraordinary thing is your party doesn't seem to have accepted or even respected that grief. I mean, there is no representation of it in Parliament, as far as one can see.
Oh, well, we have been. We've been debating it for the last couple of days, but we've been absolutely clear right from the start that we wouldn't frustrate the process of leaving Europe, that we respect the democratic will of the people, but that we want to hold the government to account on it. We've been quite successful at that so far. We've had a white paper. The government didn't want to do that. We've had concessions from the government, and we'll continue to do that.
OK. Heidi Allen, the really fascinating thing here has been that the great drive for Brexit has been one about sovereignty for many people, and yet when it came to the sovereignty of Parliament, the government had no interest whatever in either offering MPs a vote on the terms of Brexit or indeed offering a white paper. All these things, even tonight, the very fact that you're standing there has had to be dragged out of the government at every stage.
Well, it's funny because Angela and I were chatting about this earlier, actually. It's not just the government, it's, you know, some of the citizens of the UK as well, that they like the idea of sovereignty when it came to having national referendum, but now when it comes to debating the deal, well, should Parliament have a role? So clearly it's confusing for some. I think it's absolutely right. I think, to be fair to the government, in their view, the number of debates we've had, the select committees that are set up, the number of questions that are responded to in the House, they probably felt that enough meaningful debate would take place. But I'm certainly pleased that we do have a white paper, and I was disappointed that one of the amendments got turned down last night, which would have given Parliament a greater say in the final deal. But I think slowly we are inching there. And, you know, it is vital that Parliament has a role in this. My Remain constituency will want to make sure that I have given it everything I've got to make sure that deal works and is sensible for my constituents.
But when it comes to it tonight, how many of your colleagues will actually vote against Brexit?
On my side, I suspect only one. I would imagine only Ken Clarke will.
And he has now assumed for the 48% a heroic status.
Yes, he has. I mean, it's funny that the 48%, I have a lot of those in my constituency too, but most are, you know, as Angela described, maturely reaching the conclusion that this wasn't a normal vote last year in June. This was a national referendum. We put the answer, or the question rather, into the hands of the British people. So it's right that we absolutely respect that. And most of my constituents are coming round to that and now are just interested in the deal and let's making sure we get the very best out of it. You know, we've moved on.
Angela Rayner, do you think that there will be comeback for MPs in their constituencies?
Well, I hope not. This is the democratic process, you know, constituents sometimes, you know, we often say we speak on behalf of our constituents, but of course constituents have different views at times, so you have to make a judgment call based upon the situation that you're in. There was a referendum, it's clear what that referendum result was, and you know, MPs have to do what they think's right by their constituents and by the country. We're clear as the Labour leadership that we have to respect that mandate, and we will be voting to trigger Article 50, but making sure that the government responsible to Parliament and we get the best possible deal for our constituents.
Yeah, I mean, you talk a very good story, but the truth is you are bitterly and perhaps terminally destroyed by this vote. This is the worst sort of division Labour has seen in many, many years.
Well, John, you talk a good story, and the media do, because I'm living and breathing what's happening here, and I'm not seeing those level of divisions. Yes, people are quite rightly upset and concerned about what Brexit will mean to them, but our shadow cabinet and our leadership are absolutely clear, and have been right from the start, that we have to respect the democratic will of the people, and that we will trigger Article 50.
And Heidi Allen, finally, you're satisfied that henceforth Labour, Tory, Liberal, Scott Nats MPs will get a proper role in what happens from here on in to get a decent deal in Europe?
Absolutely, and it's incumbent on every single one of us to make absolutely certain that we do.
Well, thank you both very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. Coming up later in the programme...
Gillian Traun, why are you hiding from us?
On the trail of Labour in Cumbria, where the party is fighting to hold on to its seat in the Copeland by-election.
While we've been on air, the government has released a statement saying no extra money has been promised to Surrey County Council in return for them cancelling their council tax referendum. But there have been discussions for a pilot area for reforms to social care. Not sure what that means. We'll look into it.